Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare. If you saw my last video on Spider-Man PS4 all the way back, wow, like a whole year ago now, you know that I've played my fair share of Spider-Man games. Some great, some less great. And while the PS4 exclusive represents an exciting fresh start for the franchise, I still think it's worth talking about where the series has been, what the past games did well, and maybe even more importantly, what should be avoided at all costs. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Spider-Man 3 on the Wii. But you know, petty grievances aside, I do think there is a lot to be gained from the developers of this game looking to what's been done in the past, even if the future of the franchise seems brighter than ever.
You don't need to look at your cards, Punisher. Your bluffs are so
I guess I'll start with the obvious. At a recent E3 event, the team behind the new game was asked if they took any inspiration from past Spidey titles, and they went out of their way to mention Spider-Man II.
Yes, those are great games and we played them. Yes, we played Spider-Man 2.
And of course they did. While it maybe hasn't aged as well as I'd like, Spider-Man 2 is still the touchstone when it comes to Spider-Man and gaming. Now there had been other great Spider-Man games. Neversoft's PlayStation Classic and its highly underrated sequels are good examples. But Spider-Man 2 was special. These days it seems like every game is offering up a big open world, but back in 2004, that was incredible, especially on a console. Because I was a bit too young for GTA back then, and I think Spider-Man 2 was the first real open world game I ever played. When you fired up the GameCube or PS2 or whatever and played it for the first time, it was kind of mind-blowing to see the possibilities of the virtual New York laid out in front of you. Spider-Man PS4 doesn't literally need to remake that game or anything. I mean, I'm really glad that they're not. It's very dated in a lot of ways. But it definitely needs to recreate that feeling. And from what we've seen of the game so far, I think there's a huge chance that it could. Swinging around at sunset, completing side quests with really smooth looking combat. It isn't recreating Spider-Man 2 as it literally existed. It's more like Spider-Man 2 as it's remembered from nostalgic memories. And that sounds pretty great to me. But one area that's always been kind of a stumbling block for past Spider-Man games remains a big question mark here. The actual narrative and characterization of Peter Parker. Most Spider-Man games don't really care about Spidey's alter ego. Sure, they may use it as an excuse for some photography or pizza delivery side missions, but it's almost always Spider-Man taking the driver's seat, which makes a lot of sense. The character of Spider-Man is insanely video game friendly. Peter Parker is just a regular guy with a job. But to Insomniac Games' credit, it really does seem like they're putting in the effort to tell a real story with him this time. And while, to be honest, I'm not really sold on this new voice actor yet, the small scenes we've seen Peter in look pretty promising. Couple that with the news that Mary Jane will be playable in some form, and it's really starting to look like Spider-Man PS4 may be the first game in the series to really care about Peter's story beyond just his function as the web slinger.
It's payback time for kidnapping my wife.
Jeez, one little mistake. We said we're sorry.
But there's one simple thing that should really set this one apart from past Spider-Man games. Time. Specifically the fact that unlike past titles, this game isn't rushing to meet a deadline of a movie or a TV show. Something that's always plagued Spider-Man games, from the early days on the NES to the incredibly awful Amazing Spider-Man 2, is a lack of polish, and they're definitely not alone in that. So many licensed games, to me at least, seem to have the seeds of a great idea, and just needed a little bit more playtesting and polishing to be something special. In my last video on this game, I got a little bit of flack in the comments for not being that into Spider-Man Web of Shadows, and you know, maybe I was a little harsh. I think that game is a real step above most of the past titles. But even though it wasn't a tie-in, there was just something that felt kind of rushed about it. It was buggy, it had a lot of bad lip sync issues graphically, and most frustrating of all, it was filled with good ideas. I loved the core concept of the game, so to see it pushed out the door before it was ready was really frustrating. Hopefully Spider-Man PS4 will be a different story. It's had a very long development cycle and is being treated as a AAA game, not just a slapped together licensed one. So much of a great Spider-Man game is the flow, just just the simple way it feels in your hands. And that's something that they keep emphasizing when they talk about this game. So hopefully that extra level of polish can really take the game to the next level and make sure that this takes the title of the best Spidey game ever.
In Spider-Man 2, the game, you have the freedom to go wherever you want, whenever you want. Use amazing new ability.
But there is a couple of underrated games I wanted to talk about as well. Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions and Spider-Man The Edge of Time. These may seem like weird games to bring up when talking about the new one. After all, they're very linear, while the biggest selling point of the new one is just how open it is. But I don't think they should be overlooked. For one thing, they're much better than Beanox's 2 open world efforts, though one of those was pretty decent too. More importantly though, the writing in these games is surprisingly solid, in a way that I really hope the PS4 game can match. I don't mean the whole multiverse angle, like obviously Insomniac Spider-Man is telling a much more grounded story, and there's nothing wrong with that. I more mean how the characters interact. I absolutely loved how well defined each Spider-Man is. Noir, 2099, Amazing, Ultimate. They all had very unique personalities, and it was obvious that a ton of thought had been put into how they were written. That was really refreshing, since most games in the series tend to have Peter give a few quips, say a couple catchphrases, and call it a day on characterization. I'm pretty confident that the gameplay in the new title will be great, but like I said, the story is the biggest question mark for me. So let's talk villains. So far we've seen a lot of the usual suspects from the game. Scorpion, Rhino, Electro, Norman Osborn, though maybe not as the Green Goblin, and a couple more. But they seem to really be highlighting Mr. Negative, and I like this idea. Unlike someone like the Shocker, who we see robbing a bank in the demo almost exactly like he is in the first Spider-Man movie game, Mr. Negative hasn't been done to death already and will be a complete unknown to more casual players. This gives them the chance to totally reshape the character from the ground up. Weird reference point maybe, but it kind of reminds me of how Batman the Animated Series took Mr. Freeze, who was at that point thought of as kind of campy, and totally put a new spin on him, which has been the basis of the character in the comics ever since. Insomniac has a chance to make Negative their Mr. Freeze, and with it being confirmed that he's going to be Aunt May's boss who's living a double life as a philanthropist, it looks like he's going to be a huge part of this story.
Hey, yo, whoa, hold on there, Mike. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Drop the shoe and discover the power of being Spider-Man.
Taken all together, I'm really looking forward to this new game. The web swinging, the alternate costumes, the detailed open world, it looks like it'll be the game that I desperately wanted Amazing Spider-Man 2 to be, and really wasn't. But from a story perspective, I hope the team at Insomniac has paid close attention to what has worked and what has not worked in past games in the franchise. By making sure the quality of the writing matches that of the gameplay, they could create something truly special with the character. If you're interested in that kind of character-based writing, I really want to recommend Lindsay Summers' online class, The Creative Writer's Toolkit, Writing a Character Study. It's engaging, educational, and maybe above all, it makes writing fiction approachable and fun. And it does this while really digging deep into the question of how to create a compelling character. And you can only find it on Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with over 20,000 classes in design, filmmaking, writing, and a lot more, with a premium membership giving you unlimited access to high-quality classes on must-know topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. The Creative Writer's Toolkit is just one example. There's honestly so many more writing classes to learn from. I'm really happy to have Skillshare back as a sponsor because their classes are a really great way to learn in a style that's convenient for anyone's schedule, and I think there's a ton of value in that. So to sign up and get 2 months of unlimited access to over 20,000 classes, go to skl.sh/CaptainMidnight. Again, that's skl.sh/CaptainMidnight. So get in on this deal now and start learning today. Hey guys, that is it for me this week. You know, by the time you're watching this, I'll actually be in the middle of VidCon, so hopefully I'll see some of you guys there. But I want to know, what do you want most from Spider-Man on the PS4? I'll be checking out your suggestions, and I'll see you next week.